News You Need. News You Need is a look at current events and how they affect the college community and beyond. And now here's the host of News You Need, Dr. Ed Simpson.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very, very special edition of News You Need. We will be chatting for the next little while. We're not quite sure how long. We may go for a long time. We'll see. We'll kind of see where the conversation takes us. So this is an ad hoc, off the books News You Need special. And our introduction keeps playing here. I'm going to signal our engineer to cut it off. This is the show where we normally talk with the best human beings in the whole world, which is our USM students. We talk about what's in the news, and we talk about the headlines, how it's affecting them, and the issues that our campus is facing. But we wanted to do a very special edition this week while the students are still here. Of course, we have graduation on Thursday and Friday. But Dr. Bob Press, who is well known to the campus community and to Mississippi and beyond, is retiring. And we wanted to make sure that we captured some of his wisdom before he got out the door and he hits the beach or whatever it is that he's doing. So welcome, Dr. Press. We appreciate you coming very much.
Thank you very much. Just glad to be here.
Absolutely. So let's, now you have signaled that you are retiring, but you've had a long and storied career. Can you kind of walk us through like that? So how long have you been at USM, and what did you do before you got to USM?
Well, it's a good question. I've actually been here about 22 years, and this is my third career. So I didn't start fresh here, but
Okay.
I got interested in teaching after working for the U.S. Agency for International Development in Morocco and Tanzania in Africa.
Wow.
And I actually resigned over displeasure of the U.S. using AID employees covertly during the war in Vietnam.
Wow.
So I sort of walked out on them. My wife was across the street at the
So
USAID.
what do you mean by covertly? What do you mean?
They were sneaking in USAID officials into the building projects in the South, and they were actually spying.
Wow.
And I got upset and wrote a letter to the head of the Agency of International Development. I said, please stop that. It's hurting us everywhere, giving us a bad name. And my boss came back with a big line through it, said, you can't do that. And I said, oh, yes, I can. And this time I didn't send him a copy. I just did it. Well, he got word of that. He wasn't happy, but I wasn't either because I was getting a little bored. AID at that time was mostly working, in addition to some projects, they were trying to curry favor with the African governments in a race with the Russians.
Right,
So
right.
I was sent out to evaluate some projects, and I said, these are failures, and they didn't like that either. So anyway, my wife was protesting the war, and I said, I'm out of here.
Wow.
And they said, okay, we'll send you back to Washington. We'll give you a return ticket. That's fine. I said, yeah, but let us pick up the ticket in India. And he said, what? Well, we hitchhiked around the world, actually. We started across Africa, some pretty rough roads and wonderful people, no problems, Sahara Desert. And then we got into Europe. My wife said, Betty Press. She used to teach here, by the way.
I knew that.
Yeah.
Art.
Yeah,
right?
she was teaching photography.
Right.
So she said, okay, we're done, right? I said, no, turn the other way. We're going over to Asia now. So we spent 2 years, and then we got back home, broke. That may happen again. Too.
Right. There you go.
And then, the hitchhiking, I think, is memorable. She's been pushing me to write a book about that.
Interesting. So how long were you on the road?
2 years.
And were you literally hitchhiking with the thumb out?
Literally.
And did you have any, like, scary or kind of sketchy experiences? Or was it all kind of, hey, come on in?
Actually found a world pretty much at peace at that time. We went through countries which you can't get through now. And the only time was a drunk soldier invited us into the barracks in Congo, and I said, no, thank you. But outside of that, when you think back, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
And I love hitchhiking. You meet some great people.
Yeah.
We had fun.
Yeah.
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 Crossing the Sahara was funny because you can't go in a car or you get lost. People die out there. But at that time, there was a number of people going across the Sahara. So we got a truck, hopped on the back, paid the money, and took off. 1,500 miles, went too fast. And in the middle of the trip, the driver pulled out a Coca-Cola and said, "This is for you."
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Truck full of dates. You
Wow.
can imagine. What we're
Interesting.
eating.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Well, that was the first career.
Yeah.
Second career was with journalism, like you've done.
Yeah.
Where'd you do your journalism?
I was a journalist in West Virginia, Ohio, and Missouri.
Morgantown, you said, right?
I grew up in Morgantown.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I was the bureau chief for UPI in West Virginia for several years.
Well, United Press International is one of the best, so you've had some experience.
I did.
We get the value of that here.
Yeah, you're one of the few that remember UPI.
Maybe so. So the second career after hitchhiking was with the Christian Science Monitor, which is a daily newspaper that's ranked pretty high globally and nationally.
Yeah, absolutely.
You would know that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, very well respected.
Yeah.
Publication.
And no, I didn't do church news. I did political news in the U.S. through the South, and that was good.
What years were those, Bob?
We were there from probably about 1987. No, before. We got 3 careers going.
Yeah.
We were there altogether about 20 years, but we ended in 1995.
Gotcha. Okay.
So in that time, Africa was my main post.
Yeah.
Was full of revolution and things. So we did nice stories about good people, but we also went to some war zones. I don't call myself a war reporter because I'm kind of scared when I get into a war zone.
Sure. Yeah.
But we managed to have good help. There's groups overseas that are helping with development and trying to help people and everything. So, yeah, I'll tell you about one incident that sticks in my mind in northern Somalia. It was a kind of a rough country at the time. The people were great, but we went to a peace conference, and our taxi driver got followed by a guy, and we call them the Mad Max cars. They were trucks, actually.
Yep.
You know about it.
I do,
Cut the top off so they could put anti-aircraft guns on it. And the guy started firing at us. We could see behind us the little white marks as the bullets came down a little bit closer. So the driver's really good. So he speeds up. He's tearing into this little village, turns around, and all of a sudden, we're facing this guy with a tank, and he's starting to lower the boom. He's going to blow up the car, and we're in the back seat. I'm too scared to move. And the old man comes out and waves a cane. He says, no, you can't shoot that car. It belongs to somebody else. And so it wasn't to save us, it was to save the car. So we didn't get shot. We continued on to the peace the peace conference.
Yeah.
And that's where my wife gets in trouble. She gets us into trouble sometimes because she doesn't, hesitate to go where there's a good picture. So she went back for one more picture, and this guy grabbed her gun, and she's up there tugging, and he won the tug of war.
She lost her camera?
She lost her camera, which really kind of upset her,
Well, yeah.
But Betty, I don't know. She should have learned something more about being careful, I think,
So how long have you been married?
That's a secret, but it's a good secret.
Yeah.
We've been married. This is my first and only and last wife. I'm very happy to be with her.
That's amazing.
But she was in a place where they were in southern Sudan, which was at war. There was a Russian plane that went overhead, but it was piloted by Sudanese. And they were dropping some bombs in the area, and we thought we're under a white tank, white flag. It was a Red Cross flag. But they used it as a target. So we all jumped in the ditch, except my wife, who wanted to get a picture of the, coming overhead. And we're screaming at her, and she gets the picture of the bay doors opening, and then she jumped in the ditch. So she got a good photo.
There you go. Get the photo first.
Yeah.
Then take cover. Okay. So you're at the Christian Science Monitor, and then what? Well,
actually, I was in Africa for about 8 years as their bureau chief. I wrote a book, and I came back, and I was writing the book at Stetson University over in Florida. And they asked me to substitute for a teacher who didn't show up. I said, I don't teach. I mean, I don't know how to teach. And they say, just try it. Well, I didn't know how to teach. I don't think it did very well, but I liked it. I kind of got the idea. You know, you've been in journalism. It's exciting, it's fun, but it's kind of self-centered. It's all about you and what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, why not go get a PhD and learn how to teach and try to help young people reach their dreams?
Yeah. Where'd you get your PhD from?
University of Florida.
Yeah. Okay.
I called the guy up and I said, I want to do this. And he said, okay, come next year. We just started this year. No, I said, I want to go next week. Well, he said, it's possible. So they made it possible. And
interesting. What year was this?
That was 2009. No, let's see. I graduated in 2003, so that would have been 1999.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I got my doctorate finished in 2012
What was yours then?
in journalism,
Okay.
mass communication.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Those PhDs take a little work, you know?
They do. Yeah, they absolutely do. And what I learned when I went into PhD school is that I knew nothing. And I thought my plan was to stave journalism. That was still my plan, actually. But I thought I thought I knew everything. I thought, blah 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 blah. I just need the piece of paper. And then it took about a year for me to really figure out I don't know anything. I got to learn this higher ed game. I got to learn the research game. So I did figure it out, but it took me. It was a good year, solid transition.
Did you enjoy it?
Loved it. Loved it. Best 4 years ever.
What got you into journalism?
Oh, I'm a child of Watergate.
Okay.
So I remember listening to the radio,
Yeah.
weirdly. Now, we did have television in West Virginia, but what I remember most is listening on Saturday mornings to the radio. I do remember the Watergate hearings. I would come home from school and we would watch the Watergate hearings.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad talking a lot about it. And so what I learned, and this is what I tell my students, is that what I learned is I didn't want to be a politician and do it better. I wanted to be the journalist telling the community, hey, there's something you need to be paying attention to. That's what I learned from that. Yeah. What got you into it?
Well, I was going to go into something else, but I decided journalism. I was always active as a journalist in high school and stuff, you know.
Oh, okay.
I guess I just like to.
What was your undergrad degree?
My undergraduate degree was in journalism.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So why political science? So you say, I want a PhD.
Yeah.
You figured out you want to teach. So, which is a smart thing, say, oh, I need a PhD if I'm truly going to teach, which a lot of students are surprised. You really do need a PhD to be on a tenure track at a bigger school.
Yeah,
anyway.
it helps.
Why political science?
Well, actually, I was going to do history.
Okay.
But I went to a conference, and we had lunch, and we were sitting out on a side, steps there during the break, and everybody was talking about their summer plans. And I listen. I'm a good listener. And they all had one thing in common. They do it underground. They go into archives. And I thought, I like to be above ground where there's a little bit of sunshine. And so I said, I'm out of here. So I went into political science.
Interesting.
Plus, I'd been in Kenya, and so the Kenyan.
Well, that's why I thought you were going to head is policy, the idea of policy and national policy, foreign policy. That's kind of where political science, I thought, would take you.
Well, you'd think so. What actually happened was I had to decide between comparative politics, as they call it. It's basically how one country compares to another, what are the differences, or quantitative. So I'm not very good at math, and international politics was the other one, but it's mostly math and statistics. And I sat and talked with a guy for about 2 minutes, and I said, no, go comparative. So I like to travel, and so I picked that. I tried to get out an year early and took the exam and totally failed it. That didn't work at all.
Interesting. I'm going to give my engineer a 30-second heads up, and we're going to take our first break here. Really? So when you say take the exam, you mean the comps?
Yeah.
And you failed?
Yeah. Yeah. I did.
Okay.
Fell flat. I thought I had this made,
Wow.
Anyway, I did finish, but there was one more exam, as you know. You've been through it.
Yep.
You remember when you go into that last room and they want to ask you all sorts of questions, anything can happen? Well, somebody said, bring some water.
Yeah.
They usually run out of water.
Really good advice.
Yeah, and you put a double sweater on because they're going to be cold and shaking, but not you. So I was a
So
little
that
scared.
worked. That worked.
Everything went fine. My advisor was there, except one guy. You know how that goes. There's always this one guy who's going to ask this zinger of a question.
Yeah.
And he did. And he started talking. Don't you think? And he went on and on of all the theories we're supposed to know. And my answer was, yes, I agree.
You know what? We're gonna actually take a break on that. We'll be back in about 60 seconds.
Sponsorship comes from Southern Beverage, your local Michelob Ultra distributor. Michelob Ultra has significantly fewer carbs and calories per serving if you are watching those in your diet. You can reach Southern Beverage by phone at 601-268-9111, or you can find them on the internet at southernbeverage.com. Anheuser-Busch, St. Louis, Missouri, and Southern Beverage ask you to please drink responsibly. Sponsorship comes from American Graphics. Located at 8 Commercial Warehouse Drive in Hattiesburg, American Graphics provides custom screen printing and embroidery. They can be reached by phone at 601-602-2277. And the website is goamericangraphics.com. American Graphics, printing at its finest.
Okay, we are back, I think. Yeah, we got a thumbs up from our engineer. Yeah, so we're talking about the strange and weird PhD journey. It really is a secret society. If you haven't been through it, you can't understand it. You know, this whole egghead thing that's out there in popular culture, it's somewhat like that, but not really like that. Okay, so you got your PhD, and then you went, when did you land at USM?
2003.
Oh, so this is your first gig out of doc school?
Yeah, I made one application, and then they said, okay, come on down.
Well, you'd already had a book under your belt, right?
I had a book under my belt, yeah. And I looked over the faculty, and I said, I'm not sure that I'm the person you need, which is kind of crazy. I said, I think you need this, and I'm not sure I have all that. Yeah. And they said, you're just a candidate, just we'll decide.
Yeah,
So,
interesting. So what's your research interest? What do you look at?
social movements, which basically is how people try to change their government for the better.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, we need more of that.
We'll get to that later. Yeah, we could use a little. But basically, in Kenya, where I'd been at bureau chief, I watched a government come into being, and so I went back and interviewed the people who were part of it. And this is what gave me a break. It gave me a break because I came up with a method of social movements that none of the experts said had been done. They said it really doesn't work, but it got good reviews, and it did work. In other words, instead of having big groups of people march down the street, if you've got a really dangerous government and they can shoot you and kill you while you march down the street, you don't march down the street. You do little things like a journalist writes an article weakening them, a lawyer goes into court. They were still pretending to be justifiable, legal.
Right.
And little by little, you know the piranha fish? You ever been fishing?
No, but I'm aware of the species piranha.
Yeah, they're scary. They're little and they just bite everywhere.
Yeah.
So I came up with a new theory on social movements. It's not about organizations. It's about individuals.
Yeah.
And
that's powerful.
Got some good reviews and kept doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I do want to come back to that because I really think in our current moment there's a lot of power to that idea.
Yeah,
so I do, but I do want to come back to that.
Come back to that.
So
I agree with you there.
Yeah. So you get to USM, the 2003. I thought you'd been here just a little bit longer than that. So let's talk a little bit about teaching. So how have you found your teaching career, and do you see a difference in the students that you first taught, say, in 2003 and for the first 5-6 years, and then the students you're seeing like now, the last couple of years? What do you think?
Well, I got thrown into this sort of cold water. They said, you've got two American Government 101 classes, which is the beginning class. I had never taught before, remember? And they had 60 students in each class. And they were back to back. I had an hour in between to kind of catch my breath. So I found them to be rather interesting to anything that I had to share with them. But what really caught my eye was they like to have somebody not just standing up talking. And, you know, that's boring even to me, you know, if I'm in a class. So I remember in this very building, I remember running up the stairs with one of the students, and he says, "Mr. Bob, what are we going to do today?" I said, "I have no idea, but it's going to be fun." And still don't remember everything we did, but we just did everything. And in those days, you had to carry your own equipment into the room and set it up. So variety, that was my lesson.
Yeah.
And I thought you had to give tests, but I don't like tests, but I went ahead with it for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I did open book tests. And somebody said, the students will cheat, they're just going to read the book. I'm giving them the book. They're not cheating. They're
Right.
probably reading it for the first time. You know?
During the test.
Yeah. Well, I didn't give a test.
Yeah.
I didn't give it. So what happens well, let's see what these two do, because they were twins
Interesting.
and they got different grades.
Huh.
And they loved it. So I thought, okay, I don't really like tests. I never liked them myself. And let's do a quick poll. We'll say, how many students out there really like tests? Raise your hands. I can't see them, but we know they're all raising their hands, right? Actually, they're probably getting ready to graduate.
Yeah, they are. Absolutely.
So I've invented a style over the years, and the ones most recently, I think you would like it, but I have a feeling your students are very interactive, which is the key.
Yeah.
And I hate just lectures where you just go in. We had one lecturer one time. He would face away from the clock, but everybody watches the clock. And after 59 minutes, he would say, "Are there any questions?" If you're awake, So I got rid of tests. I started involving students.
Interesting.
And how do you involve students?
Well, that's what we're very hands-on over here. So I mean, the probably at least 70% or so of our courses are project-based. So they're going out. Yeah, our video person's nodding. So they're different kinds of videos, different kinds of sound,
You got a
different
student
kinds
right
of
here, and
different kinds
another
of
one over there.
Yep, different kinds of writing. I mean, so we're very project-based.
Well, my parting criticism of our education system right here at USM is, except for massive classes where you just have to lecture, but I think I'd still throw things out.
Yeah.
Catch this, and is that we still kind of have too much talking.
Well, that's interesting. I have been on the fence on that some. It's we went through a period, you were here, when we talked about flipped classrooms, this idea where you would record a lecture, they would watch the lecture, and then come into class and they would actually do the work. And so it was hands-on, interactive in the class.
Did that work?
No, not much. Not much. But then, the project based, like I'm going to show you, now you show me, you go and do, and then you show me. If the students are there, it works. But if the students are not in the moment, if they are trapped on their phones, if their mind is elsewhere, I'm not sure. But I do agree with you. Talking to them for 55 minutes is not where it's at.
Well, I think the training program at AQ that we have here, and Kelly Lester in particular, taught everybody to just short lectures, as short as 10 minutes maybe.
Yep, chunks.
Yeah, just chunks. And at times I've flipped the cart all the way. I don't know, maybe I did it too much, but I think for most students it worked. For example, let's say you're in my class, okay, and you're on a team. Got 4 people. You could be the captain, and you would just tell what the chapter says, but you'd analyze it. You'd analyze the chapter, and then close the book. Okay. The rest of your team members have to come up with themes that stem from that chapter, and they do wonderful things. I mean, they're getting stuff that I would never have thought about.
Yeah, I think that's great. Right, and I think that asking them to engage in the material in an interactive way, I think that's all really good. I think that's great. I think we don't do it enough, and I agree with you.
Well, you know as well as I do, the 2 things, they always say 2 things: students only move for points and food. I think there's some truth to that as far as extra activities, and I understand it. But it wasn't actually Ben Franklin that said this, but he always gets the credit. But you tell me and I forget, you involve me and I learn.
Yep.
So I like your method. Is it working?
Is it working? I will say this. Our students are getting jobs. Many of them, not all of them, are excited about their programs. They're out there doing things, and we have like a whole bunch of stuff we can show that they've done. So overall, I think it's working. I think we need to do better as a school here, school meeting communication, but also as a university, in challenging our students. And this is what I tell them all the time. I can look you in the eye and say, you can compete with anybody in the country. I am familiar with most journalism schools in this country. You can compete with any of them. I need you to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Now I need you to believe it, and now I need you to go show me. And that's the conversation we have.
Show me from Missouri.
That's it. So we need to keep having that conversation, I think, over and over and over again. I think that USM as a university needs to challenge our students more, to show what they can do, to get out there, compete for these national internships, compete for these national prizes, because you can.
I agree. I think that's important, and I do think they lack confidence. I don't know why. But when I start a class, I always ask, how many people are working? Almost all the hands go up. I said, keep them up. As I get to your number, if I pass your number, to put it down. 5 hours a week, 10, 15, 20, 20. I always get up to 30, and there's always some that are 50 and more. Frankly, I don't think I could do it.
Yeah.
I really don't.
Well, and some of them, I think the challenge is don't do it. I mean, there's a few that if you're having to work 50, 60 hours a week, get your life in a place where going to college is a good experience for you.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that. So what I've noticed, Bob, is that in the last 4 or 5 years in particular, going into COVID, post-COVID, students seem, there seems to be a little bit of their soul is missing, a little bit of the connection with the world is missing, that has been exacerbated by social media in this little pocket computer we carry around, you know, the iPhone. What do you think?
Whew. Well, first of all, I agree, and I'm not the expert on it. You'd have to ask students.
Right.
They're the experts. But I have noticed some difference. I went to a goodbye party for Khartoum, who is very active and very interactive, and she said something that I'd forgotten, was that when they said, okay, everybody has to be teaching online, I said, we have to, or was this just something everybody wants to do? Because I think the students need contact, and so she and I volunteered to be on the premises. We did empty halls, you know, but the students, they needed that. They needed that contact with somebody who's going to say, hey, you can do this, personal contact.
Yeah.
And there were some changes, because when I had to do some online things, I'd say, if I don't see you, I'm counting you absent, because there was a bunch of screens with names.
Yep.
We even have the same problem in Faculty Senate. I've challenged them at our last meeting. I said, okay, everybody open their things, please. And there were 4 or 5 of them. There was just nothing there.
No, they weren't there.
So I think they did change. And I'm not a good psychologist. You probably see it better than I do. I think now they're less sure of themselves.
Yes.
And they're not as talkative.
Yep.
Given the opportunity, they are, and this is your chance, you know, in a group. But I don't know. And then there's a bunch of them that get sick a lot.
Yes.
The health just isn't there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm looking at your assistant here, and she's nodding. She's a student.
She looks pretty healthy. She's fine.
Yeah, but it's true, don't people?
No, I agree. I think that, you know, it was only, we say only, I guess for some students it was 2 years, for others it was 1.5 years. But that loss of connection, I'm not sure they've ever truly recovered from. And I think that's where the confidence comes in from. I'm going into a new experience. I've successfully navigated it. I know I can do the next new experience. And I think that's what some of our students are wrestling with. And so they're looking for ways to get out of that new experience, because it hurts. They have a fear of failure. It's that confidence, lack of confidence.
Yeah, I hadn't thought much about the lack of confidence, but I think you've got a good point. But I think there are ways, perhaps, and I didn't do a very good job of this, of using the cell phone and using their connections. For example, we were studying about basically urban development, but political urban development.
Yeah.
And I said to them, did you know that all these highways that go through the country under Eisenhower's term were actually made intentionally to wipe out black communities, poor communities?
Yeah, exactly.
And they said, no, we didn't know. I said, okay, I'm going to give you, and I explained it a little bit. Now you've got a briefing. I'll give you 15 minutes. I want you to make a PowerPoint and share it, and we'll see who gets the best one. And I thought to myself, 15 minutes? I'm not sure I could do it. And they got together as a team, and they're so good at the communication stuff. They put it on, and we had a contest, and it was a close vote. So I wish I had done more of that.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah,
You know?
I hear you.
And a sickness is another thing, though. There's so many. I accept all excuses, and I have a smaller class, so I can do that. I know they're sincere. But they come back, and here's the mistake I made. And some of my last classes, I did too much of that. I didn't listen to Kelly Lester's ideas of group thing. So I would ask them, what do you think? I don't know. Well, I'm not sure. And then I go to somebody else, and it was just like, a morgue. I'll say, okay, everybody up. Go sit next to somebody you haven't sat with a while. Yeah, you're always two together. Get over there here. And they'd sit down, and the room explodes in conversation.
Right.
So I should have done more of that.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I should do more of that too. I think we kind of do that naturally on our projects, but yeah, I think it's a different way of connecting with the students. I think there's a lot of chatter, and I'm going to give my engineer another heads up. We'll take our second break here in a minute, and I think there's a natural desire for connection, but also a hesitancy that I haven't seen before. And so anyway, that's kind of where we're at. So we're going to take a break, and then actually we're going to pick up on kind of what's going on in the world right now. We'll get Dr. Press's thoughts on some really interesting things
And your
happening.
thoughts.
And my thoughts. I'm not going to leave you out there hanging. And we'll be right back.
Calling all families.
Calling all children and kids of all ages.
Are you looking for a variety of music the whole family can listen to?
Yeah!
Then look no further. We have traditional songs, international tunes, and fresh new beats.
Join us every Saturday morning from 9 to 10 a.m.
Right here on Southern Miss Radio.
for the Hickory Dickory Dock Show. Catch you Saturday. Catch you then.
Hey, we are back, and as usual, we talk through the break, and we're coming up with a little bit of a game plan. So, Bob, you've been around a while. You and I have both actually been around a little while. We've been out there doing some crazy things, and I was trying to talk to some of my students the other day about an analogy in history of what we're seeing currently. I don't have one. I can't quite come up with one. The closest I've come is maybe 1954, pre-Brown, which included the communist conspiracy stuff. Where university professors were getting fired because maybe they attended a communist meeting 20 years ago. But even that just seems pale in comparison to this cloud of fear that I feel across campuses, across our communities. What are you feeling, and what are you thinking here?
Well, that's a good starting point, I think. And we could actually go back further, because I think one of the biggest issues, as you know, because you cover these things, is the rule of law and the rule of the Constitution.
Yeah.
Our Constitution was set up with some holes in it, but not intentionally. It just turns out that there are some holes in it. I mean, it was the assumption was that each of the three branches would do what they're supposed to do. And if you look at a map with the lines drawn on a political science book, you find each branch has power over the other, but they also branches have power over them. And I'm thinking of the Supreme Court, and I see if I get this right, but I think it was Jackson who said, and trying to think, was it Marshall, made a Supreme Court decision. I think it was on his land acquisitions. And said you can't do it. It's not constitutional. And the phrase that comes back to mind was, okay, the Supreme Court, they made their statement, now let them enforce it.
Yep, that was Jackson.
Okay. So that was kind of scary, but somehow it faded out. And
Yeah, we navigated that.
we got through that. I can't think of any other example up until very recent time. That maybe there was something in between. Well, if you can take Mississippi, desegregation. Oh my
Well,
God.
absolutely. Well, look at Arkansas, where Eisenhower actually had to send in the National Guard to enforce
All right.
federal law, and that was considered a huge constitutional crisis at that
It
time.
was. And then you have Alabama standing in the door, the governor saying, we're not going to integrate.
Yep.
So if we remember that the way that it was ideally set up is that most of the power actually belongs to the states. The government just does these basic jobs that they're supposed to do, but one of them is called Supreme Court, and they're supposed to say when you've gone too far. And then politicians are saying, okay. But actually in Mississippi, how many years did we fight segregation or desegregation?
Oh.
30 years?
Oh,
or
at
25
least.
years?
Oh, we're still fighting it.
Yeah, and that is. And that, I hope we come back to that point, because what I'd like to discuss a little bit is, why do people of different color not like each other more? I don't want to go into that right now, because
Really?
I have a couple other things I want to share with you.
Go.
First of all, we've got this DEI bill. It's a
Yep.
brand new one.
Yep.
It's a diverse, you say it, I can't.
Anti-diversity and inclusion.
Right. Which sounds like a good idea at first, and then you can criticize it. I understand that. But it was meant overall to help blacks and other minorities sort of catch up a little bit. I don't see what's wrong with that. I really don't. Now,
Okay, not this bill. Okay, so not this bill. What you're saying is there are good things to be said about the idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
It's not
Gotcha.
such a bad thing.
Yeah.
The intention was there. But we've seen this mostly Republican legislature come up with other things, and what happens is the party comes up with an idea, then everybody mimics it. If you go back to Florida, you saw DeSantis trying to get to be president on the back of anti-black statements.
Correct.
And this is what this actually comes out of. It's not from Mississippi. It's actually not from our president. It's from, I think, mostly DeSantis.
Yeah, I would argue that Trump certainly opened the door on all of this. He did campaign on an anti-DEI. I think DeSantis clearly opportunist doing that. But I think you can also look at Mississippi. And so post Brown, where Mississippi really got its rear end handed to them for about 10 years, and rightfully so. Mississippi got its rear end handed to them in the national press. They kind of stepped back from being the leader in some of this anti-black segregationist stuff. Now you're seeing Mississippi wait. This is my take on it.
Yeah.
Wait until Texas and Florida do things, and then they go, oh, okay, well this is going to work. This is where the current anti-DEI bill came from. It's a crafted bill from, I believe it started in Texas, and then it was adopted in Florida, and now it's in Alabama and Louisiana.
Yeah.
So have you looked at that bill? What do you think? And because it really does directly address our existence here at USM as a higher education institution.
Well, first of all, I don't think it's a good thing for politicians to get involved with education and say this is what you should do and shouldn't do, because all you're doing is transferring their own biases into the classroom. And I'll come back to this in a minute, but you've got teachers here that are scared. Some are thinking of quitting teaching because they said, if I can't teach legitimately,
Right.
I don't want to teach.
Right.
Others are going to say, well, what do we do? I actually wrote this thing out,
Absolutely.
so
Go
I can
for it.
share it with you,
Yeah.
because I've been giving it a lot of thought. And it says that the new law against diversity, equity, inclusion stresses no interference with good education. Okay? Sounds good at first. But it's of itself is an interference and would likely result in less teaching of history, including the Civil War. Faculty cannot skip history that politicians don't want discussed. and faculty already comply with the new law. The bill asks teachers to not teach about our history or issues facing women or issues involving sex or race or national origin. That means the history of white Anglo-Saxons cannot be studied. It's not just for about blacks. And that also means that about women can't be discussed. I don't think anybody's going to accept that. I really don't. And that means we must pretend there was no Civil War. Well, good luck with that one. And there was no World War I. Now, how, as a result of to our veterans, what about our white Anglo-Saxon veterans who say, you mean you can't teach about our wars? No, it says you don't teach about war. Oh, really? There may be some thinking about that. So the lesson here is that censorship by any government body, in my view, is harmful. No legislature, local, state, or federal should pretend to be teachers and limit education. So the law is totally a Republican measure, copying the dictates of a Republican president, and harmful to parents who want their children to grow up educated, independent of party politics. It is vague in places, but not in others. The effect is already making teachers afraid of government censorship.
Well, and I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's okay.
Well, I mean, but I think that what we can, I think that we tend to overlook, that isn't that the real intent. The real intent of this legislation is to make teachers afraid and teach only what they think will keep them safe. So there's, they know, and by they, I mean the folks who wrote the law in Mississippi and elsewhere, know that it's intentionally vague, likely unconstitutional, and almost unenforceable because it's so vague. The enforcement is complaints.
So you're arguing basically they're not going to try to follow up on every case because they don't have to, because teachers will be self-censored.
Exactly. The whole point is self-censorship.
Now that's pretty scary.
And the whole point is that, listen, if we don't teach this stuff, then therefore there will be fewer people aware, and therefore there will be fewer people voting in the way we don't want them to vote.
Yeah, I think you're calling a spade a spade. Maybe that's the wrong color, but in any case, so it's fairly vague in places, but not in others, and the effect is already making teachers afraid. So I kind of agree with you. Government censorship for Republican Party attempt to get more support. That's partially what it is, and it's continuing a prejudice against blacks for no reason at all. That was my earlier question. What's to keep, and blacks and whites have come a long way together, and they're working together. Actually, they work together pretty well in the South. I don't know about the North, but they're probably working here as much as they do anywhere. And so why try to put roadblocks into that? But it should be challenged and declared unconstitutional, and I think it will be. Because in past global history, censorship has been implemented to the detriment of education, and parents should not have their children subjected to party politics to determine what is best for their parents, for their children. But one other thing is this, and I wrote this a little note for myself, it also unleashes a whole cast of vigilantes who are going to have their particular thing, and they're going to be sitting, tape recording, listening, and you're right. Most of the faculty are going to be scared. I think I would not be scared because I'd like to be a test case on this, but I think a lot of people are. And under the law, as you know, anybody can go in there, tape record, and say, listen, they're talking about this.
You don't even need a tape recorder. You just complain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's harmful for the parents, white and black, and I think it's kind of ridiculous. But I think our university will survive by this, because I think this wave is going to disappear.
Well, I hope it does. I don't know. I think that this is a new age that nobody can quite get their arms around. I do think that this idea of the complaint system is really interesting, and so that's what they're doing. We don't really know what is going to result from this. We don't really know. For instance, if an African American student, if you look at the law is supposed to be colorblind. That's what they say.
That's a good word.
Yeah, that's what they say. So if I'm an African American student sitting in class and we're talking about structural racism, as in redlining.
Yeah.
The idea that when blacks in a community would try to buy a home, they were steered purposely to certain neighborhoods. If I say that, and I don't talk about the fact the people doing most of the steering were white, is an African American student going to say, I'm complaining because that's not an accurate depiction and makes me uncomfortable?
But it is accurate, and if they're uncomfortable, it's their problem.
Well, I mean, but if you don't mention the fact that it's white folks doing the steering, would an African American student have a legitimate complaint?
I think so, because you're only telling half the story.
Well, that's the idea, right? So the law is written, allegedly written, to be colorblind, but the enforcement is based on complaints. So you get 500 complaints from folks saying you're not giving the full story, and 500 complaints from folks saying, okay, you're teaching too much of the full story. We only want to hear the good stuff. What do you do? What's a university do?
I think we should just do what we're supposed to do, and if it comes to court, we'll win.
Well, I mean, I think that's what folks like me and probably you and higher ed are looking to our administrators for, is a little leadership here, saying, okay, we get it that this is state law. Throughout history, there's been a ton of terrible laws. This is one of them. We've navigated all these laws, and I think USM has a really interesting story, that we are sitting 300 yards from the Klein Kennard Memorial Highway.
Yeah.
And in 1972 or so, I think we had 10 African American students.
Yes.
Now we have 32% of the student population is African American. That's a story of an organization that, now I'm not going to say that it was out of the goodness of anybody's heart. It was a response to the market, but the market worked in that case.
It did, and also we're probably more integrated, if you want to say that, or balanced than any place else, because the population of blacks in our country, in our state, matches the population percentage in the university. I would challenge anybody to see if they can beat that. So we're open. I call her my sister, but the first student, Raylani Branch, who came here.
Did you teach her?
No, I didn't teach her. I came much later.
Because I was going to say, what an honor that would have been to have.
But we've developed a relationship. When my mother died, I said, I need some relationship, a sister or something. And she said, okay. So we call each other sister and brother. Yeah, I think we'll survive. I think Joe Paul has a challenge to navigate this, but I think he can. And this will sound like a commercial, but I wrote it down because I actually believe it. I think that Joe Paul is doing his best to keep USM viable and vibrant, and somehow we'll get through this.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I think that my trust is in our students.
Yeah, they don't want it.
Yeah, they I will say the students are quiet. I would suggest they not be so quiet, but that's how they're navigating this moment. But my experience with our students is that they are kind, that they do not have the hate in their hearts that some of our politicians appear to, and that we will get through this moment. We'll figure this out. And I do think that we need to challenge our faculty. We got to follow the law, but we don't have to obey in advance, right?
I agree. I think we should just keep teaching what we normally teach. There's a couple of things that I wish the university would do, and they've been dragging their heels on this. There was in Mississippi Today had a good article on that. When a woman is raped and goes through the arduous process here of proving that she was raped, which is a tough process, and one of my former students, then they said, we don't want to see that guy on the campus ever again, physically. It's upsetting, it's psychologically traumatic. They dragged their feet forever, but then he said, okay, I'm not quite sure about this. They said, okay, for 2 years.
Yep.
But just recently, the person who was raped was on campus. At the same time, this guy came back. It was his third year or something.
Yep.
I think they need a ban that's permanent. I don't think they should have the right to come back. And maybe they can come online, but not permanent, or extend it. And they're dragging their feet, and there's no reason for doing
I
that.
am baffled and confused by this as well. My capstone class 4 years ago did an entire investigation on the sexual assault situation on campus. where there was a group of students, if you remember, 4 years ago or so, that actually held a protest in front of campus.
I
And
was there, by the way.
Were you? Good for you.
The student was one of my students.
Oh, wow. And so what they were advocating for seems to be a common sense policy of zero tolerance. If the process has concluded and it's found that this person has committed a sexual assault, then that person is barred from campus for life, or whatever. Should be. Old Miss has something like that. Mississippi State has something like that. Almost every university has something like that. Why we are somehow reticent to just embrace what appears to be common sense, I'm baffled and confused.
I don't know. It should be done very quickly.
Yeah. I mean, that seems like a simple, yes, students, we support you kind of thing. Yeah.
The other thing was we went through this program review.
Don't get me going.
It turns out there's not going to be that many people fired.
I don't think there's going to be anybody fired.
Maybe nobody. But it was done. It wasn't done in a good way. It wasn't announced in a way that we could understand. They used a standard which was twice what IHL is using.
Yeah.
That was a mistake.
Yeah. So what we're talking about out there for both of our listeners who are with us, what we're talking about is USM just recently completed basically a year-long process where any program, and by program they mean major, that fell below a certain number of students in the program, they said, hey, you're under program review and you have to come in and justify your existence. And what Bob is talking about is that USM has a standard of enrollment that is double what IHL says is its minimums. And so there was no explanation, there was no strategy, there was no what are we doing, why are we doing it. We had, I think, 2 weeks to respond. It was very bizarre.
That didn't work very well.
Yeah, this whole thing was very bizarre. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think ultimately they scared a lot of faculty, and they might have scared some away.
I think they scared students away.
I do hand it to the provost for figuring out ways of combining some programs. And then Joe Paul finally said, okay, we're not going to use a double standard. We'll continue next year at a better standard. The administration has been extremely open. I'm on the faculty senate, and they've been very open to the faculty senate requests. We have a very energetic and involved president and vice president.
Yeah.
And so I hand them that, and I think that's good. That makes good sense. But I think overall we're still solid, and we're going to be doing some good things in the years ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't given up hope at USM. I think I continue to, my faith as remains with our students. I get energized every day talking to them.
Yes.
Coming up here on the third floor of College Hall where all of our great student media folks are working. I mean, you just get, and if anybody out there is just going, hey, I need a little fresh jolt of energy, come up and talk to a young person.
That's true.
It is just absolutely the lifeblood around here. So Bob, we're going to wrap it up here real quick, but I do want to get your thoughts on a couple of other things we have. I do want to come back a little bit to this rule of law. So two things: rule of law and the immigrant issue. So I have never seen anything. Of course, I'm not 100 years old. I'm really old. But I do consider myself a bit of a historian. I do a lot of journalism history. I can't think of an analogy in our time where the core fundamental rule of law, as in I am going to rule, it's a rule of one versus a rule of law. How do we navigate this? What do we talk? How do we talk to our students about this moment that we're in?
First of all, I think it's very dangerous. It's flirting with not abiding the Constitution, and actually both the Republicans and Democrats came to an agreement on how to manage this, and Trump killed it. He said basically, don't use that, don't pass that bill. It takes away my main issue. So he's playing around. I don't even know how he feels about immigrants, except that he abused them during his early days in construction in New York City, underpaid them and things like that. I think it's an ego trip, but it's extremely dangerous and it's wrong. For example, if we really want to know if someone is coming here illegally, some sneak across the border. That's true, and they should probably be sent home. But a lot of those people that we're talking about, these imaginary figures of millions of people, we don't really know. We don't. And most of them have a paper saying you have an appointment to come in and get legalized. In fact, one of them was going in to become a citizen. And he walks in and they arrest him and they're trying to deport him. So I think it's a political game that's very dangerous and very harmful, and it's wrong, and it's challenging our system of government, whereas all three branches respect each other.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, this is where we as citizens have to look our Congress people in the eye and say, listen, are you all going to do your constitutional duty? Do we have a rule of one, or do we have a rule of law? And if we have someone who says, nope, the law does not apply to me, I make the law, and I've heard our president say that, I make the law, because he's equating, of course, an executive order with a law.
Yeah,
It
and
is
it's all
not.
It's written by some consultants who are very conservative, and it's helping the richer get money out of that. It's an underlying message there that you stick with me, you'll do well. No, I think we're at a crisis. It's quite a serious one. We have been through crisis before, but I think we'll survive this one. But there has to be a lot of pressure back from people on both sides.
Yeah, so let's actually finish on that. I think a very powerful idea, this idea of social movements. So in a time of fear, and every week on our little show that nobody listens to, we talk to students about how they're feeling and about how they're navigating this political climate. And what comes across invariably is this idea of, I'm afraid. The two things. I'm uncertain because I don't know what's going to happen, and I am afraid. So when we talk to this idea of how do you rally people in the streets when you have a surveillance society that is saying, okay, well, you were a protester, so therefore we're deporting you. Or you were a protester, so therefore we're firing you from your university position. So this idea of micro action. Talk to us about that just a little bit.
I think microaction, it's a thing I study and publish on. I think it's powerful. I was at a demonstration the other day, and I saw other people out on the streets, so the numbers are growing. There was a demonstration in all 50 states and 2 or 3 other countries in Europe. I think people are beginning to realize, and the thing is, the Republicans are beginning to join that protest. They're not just focusing on grocery prices, they're actually focusing, and rightfully so, on the whole issue of power. You see a president trying to claim all that power. So I think if you get organized, and I don't think the president's going to change, but I think the members of Congress could. And if you get organized at the grassroots level, you elect people who say the rule of law counts, and it's not presidential rule, that's part of a larger picture. So I've seen people rally under very dangerous conditions. I don't think these are dangerous at this point. I don't think people should be hesitant to demonstrate. And so this is time to action. This is time for action.
Yeah.
Republicans and Democrats.
See, I think that's the thing. And I make this argument, nobody believes me because I get it, but I don't see this as a partisan issue at all.
No, I don't think so either.
This is not Democrat, Republican. This is who are we as a country.
I totally agree. And, you know, it reminds me of a conversation I had in Colorado not too long ago after a family event. 2 farmers. My wife is from a farm country. So I sat with them and I said, I'm going to guess that you guys are Trump supporters. They said, absolutely. Okay, let's talk. And we talked for about an hour. And you know what? They started thinking, well, no, I don't really like that part of it. I don't like this. Republican farmers are really an interesting group.
Well, they're particularly interesting now because tariffs are hitting farmers pretty hard.
Yeah, they're worried about the practical things, you know. They're used to being Republican, but they're also realizing that they won't be able to go down and get their check for not planting the corners of the fields like they used to.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I'm very optimistic. I think we'll survive this. We've had almost worse moments in our...
You know, I try to find that perspective. I reach for that. Like, for instance, I've written several papers on the Sovereignty Commission here in Mississippi. Which Sovereignty Commission, and I'm surprised when I talk to Mississippians how few really remember what this was. But the Sovereignty Commission was a state agency set up to fight segregation.
Yep.
In a variety of very public ways, but also secret ways.
And they had black black investigators undercover.
Correct. They did undercover things. They had a 180-page file on Medgar Evers, all different kinds of things. So this is Mississippi's legacy, and this is something that I think as state residents we can say, listen, Mississippi has a special responsibility to future justice because of what had happened in the past.
Maybe we could be a leader in this. And if I had one other thing to say, it would be come down to the street level, take a few steps to the right or a few steps to the left if you've got a neighbor that's got a Trump flag out there, or if you're a Trump person looking for another flag, and say hello.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Get to know the
Don't
neighbors.
stop talking to each other. Do
And
your best not to stop. So am I optimistic? I'm less so than you, but I'm glad that you are. I'm struggling. I will say I'm with my students. I struggle a little bit with my own frustration and anxiety about all of this. And I get it. And I wish I had a more clear path forward. But I do know this, and I tell our journalism students this all the time, where the power comes is in action.
Yes.
The power and the feeling of ownership comes from action. Keyboard warriors do not work.
No.
We need you out there. We need your energy and your thoughts and your goodwill. That's what we need.
And the bodies. When we were talking about Iraq, my wife and I were on the highway protesting before I even had my job certified here.
Yeah, oh, there you go. So I'm going to give my engineer a heads up. We're going to close out here. What an amazing conversation with Dr. Press. Hey, real quick, I didn't ask you. So what's next? You got an Act 4 coming up here?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know exactly what it'll be, but I'm full of energy and I'm not ready to stop being energetic. So I've got a book on contract, which is a practical reason. I wasn't getting it written. My wife wants one on our travels. Be more active in the NAACP on criminal justice. I'm singing in the Meister Singers.
Really?
I run. It's going to be active, and I don't really know what that fourth thing is going to be yet.
Good for you. Well, what a special conversation. Thank you very much for being here. So this has been a special edition of News You Need. This has been a production of Southern Miss Student Media. And in our last show, the last show I said was our last show, and then this came up. So this actually will be our last show for the academic year. The plans are to return in the fall. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you in about 4 months.